Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the First Stars Podcast, fifth season. Be sure to like and subscribe. Enjoy this amazing episode because Raoul Bhaneja boards the mothership to discuss Shakespeare and Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Now, come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Bhaneja. Thank you for coming to the Versus Stars Podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's totally my pleasure. So, I would start off with the question of inspiration to inspire your love for acting and who your earliest influences.
Oh, wow. Well, I got my start really acting. Um, I went to an arts high school in my hometown of Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, for anybody who doesn't know. My dad worked for the Canadian government, and I grew up in the capital. And I'd say one of my most formative experiences was I helped found, when I was in high school, a Shakespearean street theater troupe called Company of Fools, which is still going today, over 30 years later, which is kind of amazing. But when we started, we used to do selected scenes from Shakespeare, and we would go busk. So there'd be like five or six of us. We had a tickle trunk with all the costume bits in it. We'd put out some hats, and we'd go to pretty much, there were two locations in downtown Ottawa, and we would perform selected scenes from Shakespeare. So in some ways, I'd say, I knew I wanted to be an actor by that point, but I was, 14, 15 years old, having that experience, and I was the youngest of the group, so the most of the people were in the beginning of their university years. So it was a great opportunity to work with people who were more experienced than me. And when you have that experience of playing all these different Shakespearean roles when you're a kid, you kind of get a great crash course in all these different big roles, but you're just doing them on the street. So,
Hmm.
there's a bit of grace there if you don't really know what you're doing. So, yeah, man, I was Macbeth and Bottom and Henry V and all these parts that I got to play, which was really cool. So I'd say that was one of my first inspirations, playing for the public, very accessible, very much for regular people. It wasn't like some elite audience. It was literally like people eating hot dogs on their lunch break.
That is awesome. Now, like you said, you had this remarkable career in theater, and as an English teacher, I appreciate the discussion about Shakespeare. My students just finished A Midsummer's Night Dream maybe
Ah,
about a month or
wonderful.
so ago. It was fantastic.
Brilliant.
I actually made them act it. I was like, no, we're going in front of the class. We're gonna act this out. That's the only way to do Shakespeare properly.
Exactly. Exactly. Patrick Stewart would agree.
he's I was meant I actually read his biography. It's fantastic listening to the great actors actually still talk about Shakespeare and think about Shakespeare. And there's a quote that you gave. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it. Okay.
Sure.
All right. The quote is, "Let's expand our field of reference, not obsess about Shakespeare by turning him into some kind of Confederate statue that must be pulled down. Use him to inspire or transform or adapt stories and ideas now. That's the whole point." So kind of break down what that means.
Well, there has been a movement in education all over the world, but I definitely know it's the case in North America. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad impulse to expand in English study, who people study. Now, we can, of course, say, well, Shakespeare's an old dead white guy, and why are we only doing the plays of old dead white guys? I completely get that. But we have to be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Do we need to do a Shakespeare every grade level of high school? Maybe not. Maybe we can mix it up. But to have Shakespeare kind of disappear from the curriculum, I think, is a great disservice to students. And as long as you have teachers like you who are making people read it out loud, I think there's a great opportunity I mean, Shakespeare is so much the basis of so much of our contemporary storytelling that I don't think there's any harm in teaching at least one grade of English in high school, a thorough study of a Shakespearean play. And I think sometimes, in the desire to kind of broaden our horizons in terms of literature, we just have to be careful not to go to such an extent that there's this, determination that Shakespeare's irrelevant. Now, that's happened throughout. It's not like Shakespeare has been relevant at a sort of constant since his death to now. He goes in and out of style, and he comes in and out of style. So That's always happened, but I know long after I'm gone, Shakespeare's plays will still be around.
Now this question, wasn't gonna base your quote, but also a question that every kid in my classroom always asks at the beginning of every unit. Shakespeare's died 400 something years ago. Who gives a shit? Why should I care? I know my answer to the question, but I'd love to hear your answer to the question.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is what I said that I think, Shakespeare basically has inspired almost all contemporary drama. That includes the TV shows you're watching. You can look at characters on television and they're drawn from some of the same archetypes like Iago, like Hamlet, like Viola, like Olivia, so um, I think that's one thing, but also you know, one reason I can tell you the reason Shakespeare's plays have been around for 400 years is not because English teachers have forced it on their students. The plays have been around for 400 years because there is a shockingly contemporary and vibrant soul to them, which does not exist to the same degree even in Shakespeare's contemporaries. So, he was a very special person, or if you want to get into the authorship debate, whoever wrote Shakespeare's plays, whatever collection of people who did, was a special person or were special people. So I think that's why it's kind of like, well, would you like? Let's not listen to Beethoven because it's old. Well, no, Beethoven's kind of awesome. That's why I listen to Beethoven, or perhaps even Mozart's a better example. So, but I get it. I understand it. And Shakespeare's really scary in the beginning when you're in school because you're like, what is anyone talking about? What could any of this mean? But I think one of the keys is getting people to read it out loud, to speak it out loud, to even in a real low stakes way perform it out loud. Shakespeare never wrote these plays or never created these plays for scholarship study. They were simply play scripts in commercial theater productions that needed to make money so he could send money back to Stratford or, buy a new couch or whatever. So I think, the scholarly study that's followed is amazing, but they're active, kinetic pieces of theater.
I think one of my favorite articles I ever read about Shakespeare, without going into complete detail, this is obviously a paraphrase because it was a scientific article. There's only so much I can repeat. But what it said was reading Shakespeare or understanding Shakespeare creates the same, I believe they said, neural pathways as high level mathematics in your brain. So
Well, that's interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
really
to
interesting.
study Shakespeare isn't very much doing the same molding of your brain as this high level math. And for those of us who suck at math, it's much better to be able to do Shakespeare and get the same qualities out of it than trying to decipher high end mathematics. But I mean, but when I teach Shakespeare, the one thing I do think is true of Shakespeare is that his characters are the most human, and people have not changed that much in 400 years. I mean, we like to think we have, and some levels we become more civilized in here and this or that, right? But we haven't changed that much. I do think his stories and his characters are comes the closest to truly understanding humanity.
Yeah, the human animal for all of our, as you say, modifications, updating how much even social media or phones are changing our brains. Like the human animal in 400 years, I mean, that's just a little blink, right? If you think how long even humans
Hmm.
have existed on our planet, 400 years is nothing. So, Shakespeare's plays are relevant still because, as you say, he's expressing these human desires and passions and conflicts that are still very true in people. And the other thing I think about Shakespeare is even when it comes to the tragedies is, there's a lot of humor and wit in those plays.
Hmm.
And again, the more you read them out loud and the more you perform them, you realize that even a play like Hamlet has quite a lot of humor in it.
Now you're doing something that I find absolutely fascinating with Hamlet. It's called Hamlet in parentheses solo, where you're playing I'm understanding every single character in Hamlet is being played by you. That's how I've understood, but what I've read, I haven't had a chance to watch it, but it sounds fascinating. Is that true? And how does that actually work when there's so much of Shakespeare interacting directly with the other characters?
Yeah, well, Hamlet Solo is a show I started, I premiered it 20 years ago this year, actually, and I've toured it on and off during that time. I've probably performed it over 150 times in 25 different cities across North America and in the UK. Um, I perform it solo with no props, no costume changes, no recorded sound, two lighting cues. Basically, the lights turn on and the lights turn off. I developed it over about a 5 year period with the director, Robert Ross Parker, who I've worked with very closely. And also when I was working at Shakespeare's Globe in London for a summer in 2002 with the great Mark Rylance, one of the great living actors and one of the great classical actors that's on the earth today. So, yeah, I mean, it's basically person version where I kind of cut between character. I don't like run over to this side of the stage and then run over to that side of the stage. It's kind of like we started to develop a filmic kind of vocabulary for it. And once, like in any Shakespeare play, once the audience is introduced to a character and they know kind of how they move and how they sound, and that everyone calls him king or calls her my queen, then the audience starts to figure out who everyone is. And in our version, the irony is, of course, it should be the most confusing version of Hamlet you ever see because it's only one guy doing it. But I've had so many people in the last 20 years say that, in fact, it's one of the clearest versions they've ever seen of Hamlet because of the way the viewer or the audience member has to engage with the solo version of it. When you first do it, it's kind of almost like an Olympic feat. It's like, oh my God, look at me. How did I do this 2 hour solo show for you and still stand? And as the years have gone on and as I've gotten more mature and sort of that kind of validation has meant less and less to me. Now it's really more about how intimate can I make the experience of the play for people, almost like maybe the first time they read it or the very first time they saw it when they didn't know how it was going to end, when really it's just about the audience, the language, and the actor. That's really all that our production conjures, and the rest of it, the like if you're reading a novel, the rest of it, the audience member has to kind of create. So, yeah, it's been a really cool experience, and I try to make sure I do some production of it almost every year, so I can keep it in my brain and in my body.
So, um, when we're thinking about your Hamlet solo, a play, is it more? Do you find it more as an exploration or development of the understanding of the characters, or is it more of an exploration, understanding of yourself as the actor, trying to delve deeper into how to turn into all these other potential characters in the play?
I hope that now it's clearly more the former, not the latter. That it's really more about my objective, in a sense, is to tell the story of Hamlet from my point of view as one performer. But really, my goal is to share with you my take on all the characters in the play and the story. And of course, when you see something in the solo format, it has its own kind of um, feel to it. And, at the end, if people go, oh, wow, that was amazing, or you did great, that's a nice thing to hear. But the much more important compliment or a much more joyous compliment is when someone comes backstage and goes, yeah, wow, that is an incredible play, isn't it? Or, man, I never heard that line before, or I never understood that that's what Hamlet meant, or, gosh, Polonius was funny. Like those are the things I almost want people, and people do often respond to it like they're seeing a full production. It's just this weird one that isn't a full production.
Now, again, I read a comment that you made about Hamlet, where you said, or stated that Hamlet is a play about isolation. Do you find that has deeper meaning when you're the only one on stage performing it?
Yeah, I think Hamlet as the character feels quite isolated, and Denmark as a nation is quite isolated, and Elsinore as a castle is quite isolated. And um, the relationships that people have between each other in that play are not exactly filled with the warmth of the Forest of Arden. You know what I mean? It doesn't have that kind of. It's cold. It's austere. It's tough. And you know, if I've been in, I was in the Arctic touring this show years ago, and I'm on my own in a hotel room, waiting 6 hours till I do the play. There are elements of when I perform the show and when I tour it where it can feel quite monastic,
Hmm.
like I'm on this sort of almost a Shakespeare missionary job where, and it's still, even in year 20, it's still the most terrifying thing I've ever done as a performer.
Mm.
It's still the most scary, overwhelming. Will I be able to get through this without messing it up? Will I be able to do it at the level that I believe I should be able to do it at? But so I can feel quite alone when I do it, even if with my directors with me or I have a great stage manager with me. But as we say in the theater, that you just kind of use it. You use it. If that's the feeling you have that day, if you use it. If you're feeling great, use it. If you feel sick, use it. So yeah, it is a lonely play, but it's such a rich play that really it's about all kinds of different things. I interviewed the great and sadly late John Neville, the great British actor. Some people will know him from that fantastic movie, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. But John had played Hamlet in 1957 at the Old Vic, I think, opposite Judi Dench. And when I asked him what the play was about in the year 2000, when I was interviewing him for this documentary, that we made a documentary about Hamlet solo, and I went around and interviewed all these different actors who played Hamlet to get, as research. And at that time, he told me that Hamlet was a play about the disillusionment of youth. And when I was 25 and I heard that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. That sounds like a good idea. And, he explained his version of it. But, when I perform it now as a father of two at 51, now I really do believe this is a play about the disillusionment of youth more than it is maybe about, I might have thought it was more about isolation before, more about. So it also, the having a chance to get back into a work of this richness, to have 20 years to kind of loop back into it and work on it and intersect with it again. I mean, that's just one of the great pleasures of my performing life, that I get to go back and re-examine this sort of bottomless pit of goodness that is Hamlet and see what it tells me.
Well, I think it was really kind of cool, like you said, having done it for 20 years, um, and being older. I'm older as well. You find yourself much closer in age to some characters than when you started doing as
Yes.
him. You're not closer to the parent of the
Yeah.
oh than you were to Hamlet. I kind of remember when I was younger and I would read Romeo and Juliet, and I was like, closer to their age, and I had my one opinion. Now, looking at it as a 46-year-old man, looking at Romeo and Juliet, going, these kids are fucking idiots. I mean, what are they talking about?
Yeah, you're all of a sudden an old Capulet going like, get out, what are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing?
Right, like I'm looking at them and I'm like, this is not a love story. They just met. What are they talking about? This doesn't make sense. Kids, calm down. You got time. But having played these characters over 20 years, and you, like I said, your age has now fluctuated from being close to the age of Hamlet. Um, has it changed your insight into each character now that not only have you played them out multiple times and seen them in different dynamics, but as you said, as you're growing older and you're looking at the situation going, you know what, Hamlet had less a point, more a point. There was more, maybe he is just not understanding, letting go of, whatever you're thinking about. How has age changed your relationship to the characters, the other characters as well in the play?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it. I had when I premiered, I had a 10-month old, 9 month, 7 month old or something when I premiered the show. So I didn't really know what it was about to be a parent.
Yeah.
And so my relationship as a parent has changed. My relationship to the play, as my parents have gotten older, my relationship to, Hamlet's relationship to his parents has changed. The whole question around mortality has changed as you get older. You think much more about what that means. And I think also, funnily enough, the hardest part in the show is Hamlet.
Mhm.
And my Hamlet's definitely gotten better in 20 years. And I would argue it's taken a long, long time for that part to become as sort of free and as easy as I'd like. In fact, the first time when I think about it, the first Hamlet I saw was the BBC Hamlet, starring Derek Jacobi, that was made for television, and it starred Patrick Stewart as Claudius. And so I remember it would have been right around the time of Next Generation. To see Patrick Stewart as Claudius was amazing, and that was kind of a tie-in for me where I was like, oh yeah, look, there's Shakespeare, great Shakespearean actor doing Star Trek. That's cool. I kind of went to it almost that way, you know. I knew him. I almost knew him more. Of course, I'd seen some of the Next Generation, but that BBC Hamlet with Derek Jacobi from about 1980, 1982, something like that. That was really my formative Hamlet for me because I watched it in English class. My grade 12 English teacher taught us Hamlet, and that was the one we watched in class. That was my first Hamlet.
I think the Hamlet for me that I think this before I became an English teacher, I started teaching when I was late in my 30s. When I first my first understanding of real I think I was Hamlet was Mel Gibson Hamlet, his Hamlet.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So there's something
Great.
about how he I mean, say what you want about him as a person, but there was something about his delivery of it where the words made sense where it never made sense before,
Hmm.
where there was like a clarity to how it sounded and what was going on. And it really kind of woke me up to the idea that Shakespeare, because you think to yourself, like, I think you think sometimes you're thinking to yourself that when you see an actor perform a role, you're like, of course that's how you would perform the role. How else would you perform the role?
Yeah,
And how
yeah, yeah.
you must have done it. But then when you see the roles on like Gibson did, you're like, oh, that's when you can make it more, right? So
Yeah.
that was kind of when I think I woke up to the quality of at least especially Hamlet.
Well, and in that production for me, I basically, my idea of Shakespeare's ghost, of Hamlet's ghost, that's performed brilliantly by the great Paul Scofield in that film.
Mm.
And I still channel in any way I can Scofield's performance as the ghost because to me, the ghost in that production in that movie was where I had never really understood the ghost before. It was always a guy coming out sort of in armor, and there's like a spooky blue light on him, and he's going, Hamlet, speak to me, Hamlet. And and Schofield comes out in close up without any of his armor on. And he's just such a masterful Shakespearean actor. And he just speaks the lines, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, I understand everything the ghost is saying. I mean, Gibson's great in it too. And I think also, when you have a movie star play Hamlet, it helps because people go, as long as they're good at it, because people go like, oh, well, if this is the guy from Lethal Weapon, like, of course I'm going to understand it. Like, sure, the words are slightly different, but, Gibson is so intense in that performance too.
Mm.
He really delivers kind of Hamlet's intensity, and his manic Gibson's manic disposition is really good because he was good at playing crazy. And now we wonder, was he playing crazy, or is he actually kind of crazy? And I think he is kind of crazy. But
uh, uh,
yeah, a great product, a good film. Zeffirelli amazing, and some incredible performances. Helena Bonham Carter. Oh yeah, great, great.
and 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 then you mentioned, yeah, there's some of the actor always in the role, right? I mean that is
Yeah.
having done Hamlet solo, you said for 20 years, is only Hamlet able to be performed that way? I mean, have you ever thought or considered like Macbeth solo or some of these other things solo, Tempest solo, things of that nature?
Yeah, I think, Shakespeare's pretty malleable. It's another reason he's been around for 400 years. He's adapted. All these other things are done to him, which is, I guess, sort of the other point of that quote that you read of mine from previously. So, yeah, you could. I mean, I've had no interest in sort of becoming a solo Shakespeare expert or but it's funny because when I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival with the production in 2007, people said to me, "Oh, what one are you bringing back next year?" And I was like, "Next year? What are you talking about?" They're like, "Well, what other one do you do? Richard the Second or Richard the Third?" And I was like, "No, no, no, no. This took me 5 years. This is my whole life's thing to figure this out." And they were like, "Oh, okay." And I realized their point, which is that at a place at Edinburgh, if you kind of have a brand and you can come back every year, that's how you build an audience. You don't build an audience by going there and doing a show once and then never coming back again. So yeah, I have to be honest. To me, Hamlet as a solo piece, because of the isolation, because of Hamlet's journey through the play. Hamlet's kind of not the only person in it, but he's our sort of centrifugal force in it, and so everything else revolves around him. So the and in some ways, Hamlet is one of the great, most articulate, and first humanist dramas. Like it's really like, who am I? Who am I? Who are we? The Peter Brook, the great dramatist, the director, used to say, The first line of Hamlet is "Who's there?" and the rest of the play is the answer. And it really is. It's like Shakespeare, I think, was not, that kind of wordplay was not beyond him. The fact that the first lines of Hamlet are "Who's there?" You're pretty much like, well, sit back for the next couple hours. That's a great question, and let's see by the time you leave if you've got an answer to it.
And yeah, the other thing kind of interesting. Like if somebody plays all the characters, they talk about having a stage director. Um, After doing it for 20 years, playing every single character, is there anything a director can really tell you that is new to what you already have understood playing these characters for 20 years?
Well, it's so interesting because in some ways the show has almost not changed in 20 years. It's not like I've gone back and restaged the whole thing. And I took a pretty long break where I didn't do it for a number of years. And when in the pandemic, I started getting together with the director, and we decided like, okay, let's do this again and see if it's worth doing, or if it's time just to let it go, like it's had its course. And we worked up in preparation, and we did it at this solo work festival in New York. And the determination we made when we came back to it after a couple years off is that we wanted to, and of course I couldn't do this play without a director, because you absolutely, as a solo artist, need to have an outside eye, because you have really no perspective on it. And if you put too much perspective on it, then you're outside of the experience.
Hmm.
So he's a very trusted friend and director. And the amazing experience is he often still, when he can, when schedule permits, he comes with me. So we've also get a chance to kind of re-rehearse it and re-examine it, and so it is evolving and changing always. But I like to think that the with experience and age, it's becoming kind of a deeper experience for the audience, and
Hmm.
it's a more economical experience for me. Like, I can sort of do it with less extraneous stuff, and it become kind of more essential, and that people are getting to see someone who's learned more about himself and about acting than when I first did it. So yeah, he actually, and I mean, no one has seen it more than him. So I don't even know how he can watch it anymore without throwing up a little bit in his mouth, but he manages to.
So when is your next performance of Hamlet solo?
This is a great question. There is talk right now in the fall of doing it at a theater in Toronto where I originated the production as a fundraiser. But those talks are just getting going. But I would look for it, I hope, in the fall of 2026, because that will be pretty much in the window of the exact 20th anniversary. And there's an endowment fund at one of the theaters here that's for new play development in honor of a friend of mine who was a great artistic director. And he's still with us, but he's retired. And I hope to do the performances in his name. But stay tuned. If you
Very
follow my
cool.
socials, if you follow my socials, you won't escape it.
Well, one thing we're going to do, I mean, obviously we're going to talk more, but we're going to do whatever you want me to put in the show notes for links to get our audit to the listeners, to whoever you need them to do. Just send me over whatever links you want. I'll make sure I put them in the show notes so they can find it.
Perfect. Yeah, great.
Now, obviously, the other thing we're definitely going to talk about is Starfleet Academy, which just recently ended the first season. We got the second season on its way, sometime in the future, next year. I would imagine.
Yeah,
Um,
let me tell you everything that happens in season two. So in season two, no, no, no,
that,
no,
that,
no,
that,
no,
that was
no.
going to be my question at some point. I'd be like, can you just walk us through the entire season? Um,
And I'll
so,
be immediately fired by Paramount and probably sent to jail and sued. So I can't tell you anything about season two, but season one, the world is your oyster.
is there an NDA for season two?
1,000% for every single person involved in the production, from the guy who wheels in the water bottles to number one on the call sheet. Yeah, we got to keep this thing under wraps. And also, it's way more fun. You know what? Like, wouldn't it suck if someone had leaked the whole season two a year before it comes out? Like that. That's terrible. You want people to live in the expectation and have fans kind of theorize about what it could be and what they want it to be. That's super exciting to me. So no, but season one, now it's all out. I can talk about everything about season one
All
because
right.
all episodes available on Paramount Plus.
So you play Commander Kelrec on, like I said, on Surf Academy, as we mentioned. Basic question first. How do you get involved in the project? And the one that everyone's be curious about, were you already a fan of Star Trek? It sounds like you were because you were a fan of Patrick Stewart. But so just kind of break it down, like how do you get involved? What was your thoughts by entering the Star Trek universe?
Yeah, I mean, my introduction to Star Trek definitely was original series. You know, I'm like I said, I'm 51 years old. So if you're my age, you grew up as a kid, where in a lot of cases in North America, you would have had cartoons in the morning, and then around lunchtime or just after lunch, there would have been an episode of Star Trek. At least that's how I grew up. So I did see quite a lot of original series. Um, and then, of course, when Next Generation arrived, I definitely saw some of that. But not long after that came out, I basically went off to theater school to learn to become an actor, and I barely watched any TV for kind of years and years and years because I was busy trying to learn how to be an actor. So I'm terrible at like Voyager, Deep Space Nine, terrible at all that. And then when I got this job, which I'll explain a little bit how I got it, when I got this job, I binged in about 2.5 weeks all of Discovery because I knew that Discovery was kind of the timeline that we were in, and also that our show would begin where Discovery ended. And of course, some of the same people who worked on Discovery would work on Starfleet Academy. So I also thought it was a good opportunity to see, like, okay, what's the style? Who are these people? Who are the artists? Um, and actually, I knew quite a few actors who appeared in Discovery at different points. So it was a great, very kind of intense deep dive into it. But I'm not a huge binger, but for work, I was happy to binge, and it was a pretty amazing immersion in it. So I would say I'm most articulate in Discovery timeline stuff. But yeah, I got the job in the crazy way that occasionally happens, which is that like you put yourself on an audition tape, probably against this very blue background. This has almost become ironic when you see an actor with this background because it means it's our audition wall because nobody wants to see like the my kitchen. Um, but one thing that was a little different is that Alex Kurtzman are of course the sort of our boss of the Star Trek universe and also one of the showrunners of Starfleet Academy. He had created a show called Clarice for CBS, which was kind of a spin-off of Silence of the Lambs. And I was very fortunate to get cast in that a couple years before. So when I got this audition, I sent Alex an email and just said, "Hey, remember me? Loved working with you. I'm auditioning for your show in this interesting part. Be fun to work with you again. Goodbye." And I didn't hear anything, as you often don't, like in those processes. But you just want someone like that to know. So because sometimes those tapes never get to the boss, you're called out early, and I didn't hear anything for a while. So I was like, "Oh, it's probably dead. Too bad." And then I got a call from my agent saying like, "Oh, in 2 days you've got a Zoom callback with Holly Hunter." And I was like, "Oh my God." And then when I went on the Zoom, I had that thing where it opened and there were like 40 windows and then they all sort of went, started closing. And I was like, "Oh my God, if Holly Hunter's on this and there's like 40 windows here, like this is the real thing. This isn't like any kind of, there's not 10 people and 20 people in consideration here.
Yeah.
Like I'm in a handful of people being considered for this." So I did that. It went quite well, but again, you never know. As an actor, you just try your best, and then you try to forget about it. But it's very hard to get this close on a Star Trek job and then go like, "Oh well, whatever. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't." So actors, we have this sort of bizarre relationship with the material where we have to really care about it and then try not to care about it at all. So then it actually went on for a little bit longer. My agent had said to me, "Oh, you'll find out soon, one way or the other." And it went in quite a long process, and they were still making up their mind. And I had another show that I was on that plays in Canada called The Trades, which is kind of a body workplace comedy. And I was going to lose that job if I didn't let them know what was going on. So I basically had to give Star Trek a deadline, which I would normally never do, except if I had another job I was going to lose. And then just at basically the very last minute, they were like, "Oh yeah, you got the job. We'll call you on Monday with the details." And I was, completely shocked and thrilled. And so began, I mean, that would have been July 2025, 4, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that would have been July 2024. And really, since July 2024, as we have just completed the second season in February of 26. It's been a pretty wild ride, really wild.
That's crazy that time must. This might be like a weird statement, I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Time must be weird for actors because for us, like for a regular person, like months went by before an answer and doing the thing, and but it's still, that moment is still something you think about. But you guys just have to like learn to live with long periods of wondering about shit. Did I get it? What happened with me in the future? And I mean, it must make. I mean, does that make time feel like it's going by quicker? Is it slower? Is it more urgent because of these things?
Well, it depends on how many auditions you have. If you're in a stretch where you have an amazing amount of opportunities, if it's Star Trek one week, White Lotus the next, The Pit the next, well, it's okay. You just say, well, whatever. One of these clever people is going to hire me. But if it's during a real fallow period, and Star Trek is the only audition you have, or you haven't worked for a year and a half, which happens to actors all the time, particularly for larger parts, where you get to a point where you can't go do a one line part on a show because you're past that in your career. You can't go that far back to
Yeah,
work. You have to stay in a certain kind of range of role or size or whatever, or project. You can go a stretch of time not working. And I think it's actually I won't be the first person to say it. If you've been on Instagram for 5 minutes and you follow actor reels or whatever, you'll see that, rejection is definitely one of the toughest things about this job,
mm.
and the not knowing. My wife's an actor too, right? So raising two kids with parents who are uh, employed, overemployed, underemployed, that roller coaster my kids have been on for 20 years.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing with Starfleet Academy is that, as you mentioned, as an old school fan of the original series, you kind of have the original groupings, Next Generation, the Deep Space Nine Voyager, in that little section, and then you have the new, they call the new Trek, which
New
is Starfleet
Trek, yep.
Academy, Discovery, Stranger World, that kind of thing. As someone who, as you said, was a fan of the original, what did you feel? How did you feel about when you heard the concept for Starfleet Academy?
Well, I mean, when I heard that Gene Roddenberry had sort of started floating the idea around 1968 for a series about Starfleet Academy, I mean, I was excited that there was going to be an opportunity to kind of realize that story idea. And, I didn't really comprehend kind of what the Star Trek sort of cultural conversation at the moment was going to involve, whether it be Elon Musk, Stephen Miller, YouTube videos about how it's Marxist propaganda. Like to to be honest, I couldn't have predicted quite that degree. But we're in a moment right now where if we're kind of in a culture war era, I guess all kinds of stuff become footballs or tools of the culture war. So there's clearly a side I'm more attuned to and more with. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be on a show like Star Trek. But I, yeah, I found that. I mean, I love that the fans are passionate about it. I love the fact, and I completely believe that people should, have their favorites and have series they like and don't like. But I guess I feel a little sad when someone says like, "Oh, well, the last good Trek was, 1989 or something." I just kind of go, "Oh man, I'm sorry. Like, I get it, but I'm sorry. Like, that's a whole bunch of shows that you didn't really care for,
Yeah.
and a lot of effort and time that's been put into it." So yeah, I've definitely, in a way I didn't understand before. I've started to kind of see that in terms of these different ideas about what new Trek is and old Trek is and Kurtzman Trek and Berman Trek and all this stuff. Like I didn't really need to understand it, frankly, because why would you unless you were a fan? Um, so yeah, that part has been kind of interesting, perplexing, and in some corners of it, of course, are disappointing. And I'm not sure if they have, in those cases, as much to do with the show, and it's a bit more about, again, a culture war or a broader conversation that's about politics and identity.
Yeah.
And the show is kind of a vehicle for that conversation, but it's not really about the show. And I'm not discounting people who don't like it. Fine. If you don't like it, that's fine. But, the racist stuff, the misogynistic stuff, the homophobic stuff, the kind of clickbait element of it, like that stuff, I understand. I mean, Some people are feeding their families that way, like, hey, I'm feeding my family by acting in it. If you're feeding your family by trashing it, I get it. Like dog eat dog world out there, and you don't have to like it. But when it's gotten to that kind of discourse, it's kind of sad.
I mean, let's see. I've enjoyed a lot of I enjoyed Starfleet Academy. You know, I think it took the first episode or so to get used to what it was going to be, but I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it a lot. The one thing that, as you mentioned about the controversies around it, I kind of feel like Starfleet Academy kind of had an unfair launch because I felt like people were angry at it before it even came out. It was like they were like there was because I'm online, I'm on a lot of Star Trek groups because I also do a lot of interviews with people from Star Trek, so I call them on
of
in the
course.
groups
Yeah.
because I'm kind of finding out, listening to what's happening, things of that nature, what's coming out, and things like that. But the amount of vitriol from a show that before it even came out was pretty strong. People's their assumptions on it was harsh. Like this is the most leftist shit of all. It's like it hasn't come out yet. It can't be yet.
Well, and I say if there's one positive that's come out of people being that, or a contingent of fans being that skeptical about it, is that is that a portion of those people who have watched it and have engaged with it, by the time they've gotten to the end, have enjoyed it, which is
Mm.
the point. I mean, I think one of the challenges that any new Star Trek property will have, which I understand now in a way I could not have understood before being on the show, is that there are so many diverse views amongst such a giant 60-year franchise and fan base that it I think universal agreement is a hard thing to find,
Mm.
and also people have strong feelings about the different eras that the show's been made in, and the people behind them. So I understand some people being like, if people didn't like any of the new shows much, I could see them going, oh well, here's another new show from all the same people who brought you all those terrible other new shows. So I kind of get that, but I also appreciate now how many people who've kind of been won over by it, because of course you're going to see a show that's primarily about young people. You're going to see a show about young people who are not full formed Starfleet officers. Otherwise, there ain't no story. Otherwise, if you think about it being a 4-year school program, I think by the time if we're lucky enough to get to the end of a fourth season, I think people will see a progression and growth of these characters. To imagine that these young kids showing up would be, fully formed, experienced Captain Kirks in their 30s is a
Right.
bit unfair, and I think just not interesting storytelling. You want to see growth, you want to see change. It's not like a sitcom, where you're seeing a sitcom. Often, you kind of see a character who's the same put in all these different situations, and
Yeah.
what we love is that they always basically do the same thing. But in something that's more of a drama and something that's more serialized, it is about seeing these people grow and change. Like how many people were like, "Oh my God, the Sam character! Ah, God, I can't take her. She's like a kid. She's like a kid who hasn't really properly grown up." And I was just hearing some of that stuff, and I was like, just wait.
Well, that's one thing. Well, that's one thing I was thinking. Like when I'm listening to people bitch, which is I guess what internet's kind of for. Is people
Mm-hmm.
angry about something and someone saying you're an idiot, someone saying this is why you're an idiot, back and forth. But um, is that how close people who were angry about it were to the actual point of it? They're like, this is stupid because the characters are acting like kids. There's the drama. It's all being it's like a soap opera. It's like, yes, they're kids. This is exactly how they would act. This is like you're right, but that's the point. This is like when you watch the other Star Trek shows. I mean, there's an episode of the original Star Trek where Kirk is having a hallucination of a guy who bullied him in
Right,
the academy. It's like, yes, that's how they were. If you
right.
saw that series, you'd be like, wow, those people are not acting like Star Trek. That guy's an asshole. Yes, that's how the academy would behave. You got it.
Yeah, like and I mean, so the problem is, like, almost anything you say on this subject as someone who's in it is, it's sort of like a gotcha, right? Like, oh, now they're saying this or they're saying that.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen it, people are quoted, and it's so deep dived and looked at and all that. I mean, so I think in some ways, as someone in it, you almost can't say anything that will make it better. You have to just kind of let the work stand on its own,
Yep.
let people react to it as they react. I don't get paid enough money to debate it online, justify it online, and like almost all online fights, particularly between men, we all know that a mind is nary changed. It's
Yeah.
just a doubling down of negative engagement, which is, of course, I mean, the thing I really worry about is like, are we feeding the beast of these social media platforms? And as someone who makes stuff for people to watch, and I make my living, am I just feeding into this thing where people are spending all their times like commenting and not watching, not engaging with the storytelling and the art? Is even though engagement's good and all that, but there's another thing where like eyeballs are all going to commentary and opinion and fights, and maybe less on like watching a new TV show that has human actors in it, which is kind of I'm hoping that shows with human actors are still a thing a decade from now. That would be nice. So anyways, it's such a huge kind of conversation, but for me, it's been a very interesting job. I've never been involved in a franchise this big. I don't know if you could really be,
Hmm.
as big as Marvel is. It's not it's not as old. There's not as many hours. There's not, Marvel movies are like a newer thing. There's nothing like a 60-year-old television franchise that's still so vibrant and that has, I don't know, 800, 718 hours. I saw some numbers saying,
Yeah.
how many hours it is. Like, it's incredible.
Well,
So, yeah.
well, it's not, I'm gonna say, I mean, talking about the hours, not even necessarily the hours. I mean, Marvel movies, and I love Marvel. I'm a nerd. I'm a full-rounded nerd. I love all things dorkish. But I love Marvel movies, and they're fun, and you get into it. The story, stuff like that. With Star Trek, it isn't just the hours. You're into People get into the culture of these things. I mean, they live
Hmm.
it. They exist within it. It's almost become its own religion, where it's like a faith-based Star Trek existence of these people, and
True.
it's gonna. I mean, it's interesting. And one thing, kind of going into a little bit of with your character too, which I kind of find like he is also kind of the existence of your character and what he represents is also in that conversation, because Commander Kelrec is the head of the War College. And if you're a Star Trek fan, the idea of a war college is very, very different to how people view what Star Trek is, which is the exploration, scientists, like that. How does Commander Kelvin and being part of the war college kind of give us another look into what the world of Star Trek has become or is?
Well, it's interesting because I think in some ways Kelric represents that aspect of Star Trek that some people were bemoaning was missing from the show. He is the person who believes in order, tradition, rigorous training, military or otherwise. Um, and he's someone who I think, and the war college idea really comes out of that concept of the burn in the Discovery series, that incident that basically helped the Federation disintegrate, and speaking of isolation, involved all the planets, all the worlds becoming much more isolated, and Earth becoming kind of going into a defensive position, leaving the Federation. Someone like Kelric, I think, he really believes in what Starfleet means and is and aspires to be, but he's not as an old Lanthanite like Nala's character. He
Hmm.
only knows the 50 years of his lifetime and the history he studied. But in his personal experience, I think he's grown up in a very brutal world compared to some of the ideals of the other eras. And so, as much as he follows the orders of Starfleet and of Admiral Vance and of the president, they're going to open this new chapter and open this new academy. I think he's skeptical about if it's going to work and if this is the right time. So that puts the character in an interesting place. And then Nala is such a unique kind of different. They're like oil and water in some
Hmm.
ways. She has a totally different approach to, I mean, she was teaching kindergarten. So he's kind of like, well, what are you doing here? Like, this isn't how we teach people to survive in a world where our cadets become officers and they die. Like there's they he. I mean, and if you think about the season, the War College doesn't have great odds, man. Like the War College loses some people, and it's brutal. And I think for him, that's the reality that he's come of age in, is that that's much more what the world is like. So I think having that War College perspective is quite interesting. And I think if anyone's looking for a character who believes in order and in tradition, he's your guy.
Well, I mean, I think that's what kind of interesting because you mentioned like the death because one of the big moments in the first season is the death of the Vulcan cadet Bobby, I think his name
Bobby,
is
Bobby,
Bobby.
yeah.
And interestingly, like I said, we don't have a lot of background on Commander Kelrec, right? We don't know, this the loss of a cadet, how new that is for him, how new of an experience. Do you think he has changed by the death of Bobby, or as you mentioned, because he has come out in a brutal existence, from after the burn, that's kind of just part of how it goes.
I think it's probably a little bit of both, but the loss of a cadet in a training exercise, I think is it's terrible, and I think he feels a great responsibility towards that, and I think he does feel the loss. He's at the same time, he's got to get on with it and um, showing his feelings, particularly in front of the cadets. One of the things I think is quite interesting about the character is we know more about his feelings and his personality and his flaws when
Mhm.
he's around the adults, but he's very careful that none of that is revealed in front of his cadets.
Mhm.
So I think in front of his cadets, he has to be the strong one. He's a leader. He's their leader. He can't have the cadets in the war college or otherwise feel that while this sacrifice was brutal and they wish it wouldn't have happened, it can't undermine the whole idea of while they're there. This is a possibility for all of us in the world
Mhm.
in this time, but also in service of Starfleet. This could happen to any of us. We're trying to train and prepare and be ready so we avoid stuff like this. And really, Bobby's death was also a self sacrifice. So, in some ways, I think, as sad as it is that Bobby's not there, I think there's some pride in the fact that Bobby sacrificed himself for the sake of another cadet. And that is deeply in the brutal reality of what it is to be a war college person. I'm not sure that our Starfleet kids at that stage in the story would have been able to do that
Mhm.
to quite the same degree. Like it's so, I mean, he takes the shot, right? When the way you see it, like it's not by accident. And even Lieutenant Tomov, poor old Lieutenant Tomov, like he sends the kids away and he knows the Furies are going to kill him, but he knows that's what he has to do. And I think that's one of the reasons why that episode really jumps out at people, and it's such a strong episode. I mean, we've got all the great Newsbraka, Nala stuff going on, which is incredible. But for people who are feeling like, man, this is went like they're putting like stinky plants in each other's rooms, like that's what the hell this thing's going to be. And then when you have that, I think it's a reminder for all of us that the stakes are
Mhm.
high, and it's interesting too, like the first six episodes were the ones that were released to the media, before the show premiered, and the later ones weren't. And in some ways, I think that was they released the first six because that in episode six you really see that the series really turns in terms of the stakes. When Tarima basically has this terrible medical emergency by pulling out
Yeah.
her thing, and Bobby dies, and Tomov dies. Like it really changes kind of the everyone's changed by it, and I think that echoes through 7, 8, 9, and 10 in a way that I think is quite useful, and is also one of the ways why I think it helped it become a more satisfying series and season for people because it had been quite carefully laid out. You couldn't do episode six as episode two.
Mhm.
The minds in charge of this stuff think about all those things. It again above my pay grade, but it's quite conscious in the planning of a season where these big things happen. And I know sometimes when people are watching something new, they're missing this and they're missing that. But when you get to see 10, of course, some people wish there were 22 episodes. I wish there were 22 episodes because I'd make a lot more money and you'd see more Kelrec. But we're just not in that world and timeline in television right now. That's not how TV's generally working, and not for a show that is basically almost a mini movie every week. I mean, I've seen episode one 3 times with a live audience on a big screen. And it's amazing to me how well the show holds up on a giant screen. Considering most people are watching it, sitting on the toilet on their phone, it's amazing to see how rich visually the show is on a big screen. So that's what you're getting each week. I wish we could do 22, but not these days.
Well, no, I mean, I like I said, I really enjoyed. I got to be part of the press junket, so I got
Mm,
some of the early episodes before I released, and I got to watch them. And I think I think I might have had the 6 episodes because when
mhm,
before
mhm.
it aired. And the funny thing was like when you're watching the first six ever episodes, the first episodes, and I'm getting ready to talk about it. I'm talking about it as Star Trek being this, or the show being this. And then after you watch the episodes that come out, like you said, after the episode that keeps going, you're like, wow, my questions were wildly off on what the show actually was. I was, it's like it's like conceptually, my thought of the show on what the show is going to be was totally different than what it ends up being once that episode occurs. And I think it was a
Yeah.
big kind of like whiplash switch, like, oh shit, this is what the show was actually going to be. They'd been kind of just like sneaking about it. These other early episodes building the characters and things. I was like, oh shit.
And I kind of wonder, like I think that takes some guts, and in this kind of age we're in of commentary and kind of instant response to things, you know, um, I'm sure it would have been tempting to kind of spill the beans earlier, but they really did need to kind of set up who these kids were and where they came from. You had to care about them, so I think that was quite conscious. And also, the after episode 6, like the whole game changes, and it does really influence how the rest of the episodes go. So yeah, I think it did surprise people how skeptical people from the beginning. I think many were quite surprised how satisfied they were by the end. And like you say, the show's gonna every show has a certain tone, a certain point of view, a certain kind of feel. So that always takes a while to get used to. And in some ways, this is quite different for Star Trek because we're not dealing with like fully formed, mature, trained people. And
Right.
it's not a case of like, well, of course the series have had the youngster, the new cadet, the new person who's just the ensign who's just showed up. But this is different. This is their world. Like this is their story, their world, their point of view. And we as the grown-ups are kind of on the outside of it. Nala's the closest to them and
Yeah.
her point of view is important. But really it's their world that we're kind of invited into as opposed to them needing to fit into the
And
grown-ups world.
and the funny, like I said, going again is every time Star Trek before this has shown the Academy, this is what they're showing. There's the episode in Next Generation where Picard is shown as a cadet when he gets stabbed by I think
Oh,
the Nausicaan, and because he's acting like an asshole and he gets himself almost killed. That's why he has the fake heart. That's Starfleet Academy. When you have Wesley Crusher and that whole situation, Starfleet Academy. That's what they're like. There's the episode. Well, there's the film Star Trek that takes place in
yes.
the universe and
Yeah.
show what it's like for Kirk when he's in the Academy in that universe. That's what the Academy is like. They hit on it so many times where I'm surprised the fans are shocked when they see exactly what you would expect from the damn show. That's what they've shown you it's like in every other iteration of Star Trek, just in snippets, little,
Yeah.
you know.
And also, we're still very influenced. Where TV is always influenced by the period it's made in.
Yeah,
And not just like the type of stories we're going to tell, but like literally what is the style of television right now? Like that always influences the era that you're seeing a Star Trek series in. So, I saw some people comment on like, oh, I wish there was more classroom stuff. I wish there were more lectures. And I'm like, I think you wish you were in lectures there. And I get that. Like, it's so cool. And I mean, I wish everyone who is a fan of Star Trek could come and walk around the atrium of the Athena, because it'll be like a religious experience to be in this giant thing, like no imagination required. Like, it's an incredible set. It's the biggest set I've ever been on. It's a beautiful creation. But we have to also look at like this is also not just in service of like people who would love to watch a scene about a long scene science lecture episode scene. It's also got to be like a show that is like contemporary television, and television where people are basically doing this the whole time. Like, it has to get people's attention. It has to appeal to an audience beyond just
Hmm.
um, like super hardcore fans. But I get that's always a push and pull, right? Because hardcore fans feel abandoned often by franchises if they don't adhere to certain things that they want. And again, they're completely free to think that. I don't really dispute that. But I do what I do dispute is like, do you think like everybody would want to see like a ton more classroom stuff? Because as you sort of said, like in the beginning, there's quite a bit of classroom stuff.
Yeah.
Then the crap hits the fan, and then they're kind of more out in the world, learning on the job.
Now, the one thing that's true of Starfleet Academy, obviously different than the other Star Trek, is that the cast, for the majority, are very young. I mean, obviously, some of us are older, but the cast is very young.
Yes,
How does that impact the energy on set? Did it feel different because of? I mean, they're basically a bunch of 20 or so year olds. I mean, I'm sure maybe they're older because obviously TV doesn't hold but young, but in my mind, they're probably around their age of the characters, 20 or so years old. How what was like on set to have that much energy or youth all around?
they are a group of kids who've come from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, all different levels of experience, to a city that almost none of them had ever been to before, to do a job they had never done before with very high stakes, and not life and death like being in Starfleet, but life and death in terms of being an actor.
Hmm.
This is the biggest opportunity any of those young actors have ever had. And boy, I wish when I was their age I'd had that opportunity. But with it comes a huge amount of pressure. And again, in a world of constant commentary and like, hi, everyone, I'm here. Tell me what you think about me. Like, oh my God. Uh, so, in some ways, the experience the actors have had is like this experience the cadets have in the series. They didn't know each other on the first day. And now, 18, 20 months into this thing, they've had to figure out how to work together. They've been each other's family. They've been each other's friends. I'm sure they've had fights and makeups and conflicts, and they work through it. They're a very tight group. They're a really good group of young people. And as much as I'm excited for the opportunity for me, I mean, I'm very excited for them, for this to be the way some of them literally start their career on camera, for this to be the way you do it.
Hmm.
So I think in some ways the show and their lives mirror each other in an interesting way, because nobody really is on home turf. Nobody's really like, oh, this is my place. If anyone is, it's Romeo, who plays Occam. Occam is from Toronto, and this show shoots in Toronto. So and also Dale, who plays Kyle. They're two kids who are from Toronto. Everybody else is from somewhere else: Australia, England, America. I mean, Sandro. To be honest, Sandro is also from Toronto, but Sandro spent quite a bit of time away, and now he's back. So, three of all of the cadets who are the main cadets who you speak are not from here, and they've had to basically gather and make a bit of a family unit to make this thing together and to get through the ups and downs of it. I mean, some of the hours these kids work, they're young, they should be able to take it. But it's been very impressive to me, and also they're just a really good group of people who look out for each other and are trying to work hard as professionals to make something really good. And that I admire in them a lot.
Well, talk about mirroring. Talk about Holly Hunter as sorry, Nala. Nala I'm so bad with it.
Okay,
Nala Akka, sorry.
okay, yeah, you got it.
And at the beginning of the show, you do have a growth between Commander Kelrec and her, and obviously as actors, as the show goes on, you have a building of respect and rapport between you and Holly Hunter. So, can I go a little into what that was like for Kelrec and why that when he kind of really started respecting her as an individual and connecting to that, how is it working with Holly Hunter?
Yeah, I think something that remains with um, Kelrick underneath everything is that he does feel that his authority has been challenged with her presence. And she is a high, I mean, while they're co-chancellors, I mean, she is a higher rank, you know, she's a captain, he's a commander. Um, and I think he's got quite accustomed at his time at the War College to being the authority on everything. And to cede that to someone else and share it with someone else, I don't think is totally his strong suit. But at the same time, he's very adherent to the wishes and the orders of Starfleet Command. So uh, the respect that Kelric and Nala gain for each other is quite hard fought and takes most of the season. But I really do think episode 6 is a hinge point because any adversarial relationship they have, and you know, he does get a bit of a schooling from her in episode 5 around the ceremonial dinner. But again, they're doing that to him so when he goes to meet this ambassador, he doesn't blow the ritual by being super uptight and angry.
Yeah,
That he's able to kind of chill out. Otherwise, he's going to blow it. So I mean, they some people I know reached out to me and said, "Oh God, they were so cruel to him," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that's also because he needed to learn that lesson." And in episode 6, I what I love about episode 6 is I think you see that when the shit hits the fan, you know, they are on the same side. And when it comes to losing a cadet and losing an officer, like it's not really about any rivalry they have with each other. When they're under attack, they're a unified force. And I think that does change their relationship as the show, you know, moves forward. You kind of realize, you know, there's more than a grudging respect for each other. There's like Nala has taught him some stuff, and I think she's come to realize he's not just a stuffed shirt and not just a uptight guy. And not and I wouldn't say that's the relationship I had with Holly, but you know, when you have an Academy Award winner working with a new actor. Now she was in, like I said, she was in my Zoom callback, so I'm sure Holly had some input in my casting. But you know, anytime you start working with an actor who you haven't worked with before, and particularly for me, you know, an actor of such renown, you know, it is daunting, and you do want to do your best, and you want to help them, but you also have to stick up for yourself and stick up for your own character's needs and wants. Um, and I'd say over the season, you know, I just gained, you know, a growing respect for Holly's leadership, her preparation, her sense of humor, her intensity, her uh, it's there's never a wasted take with her. It's always in play. And once I got used to how high the bar was set, and once we got to know each other's sort of like way we operate, you know, it just started to kind of give more and more back as we did it and as we got to know each other. And I was able to get over the fact that like, oh my God, I'm acting with Holly Hunter. I mean, you know, I've been doing it for 30 years. I've acted with some big actors over the years, but you know, almost every scene I have in the show is with her. Um, but no, it's been a very special bond, and you know, she's really exercised tremendous leadership on the show. And I also, again, think for the young actors, you know, when you have an actor of her caliber as the person you're in scenes with, it can only make you better
Hmm.
because, you know, I don't know. That's like That's like you're on, you're a pitcher, you're a pitcher and Nolan Ryan's on the team.
Yeah.
Like Nolan Ryan's on your baseball team and you're a pitcher. Well, you better sit in the bullpen with him every damn day and pick his brain or watch what he does. How does Nolan Ryan get ready? How does he prepare? To me, she's that kind of figure. Like she's a Hall of Fame type actor. And I mean, I've been doing it for 30 years and I learned from her. I was inspired by her. So, and then season two, we get to sort of continue on and the relationship changes and grows so it's been a real treat, and I just hope we get to do more. I'm so curious as to where it will go from here. I have no idea. They don't tell us anything.
Well,
We don't learn that much in advance of doing it. That's for
well,
sure.
see, my next question. I mean, technically, there's season two, so you kind of know where you're going next season. So I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway because my show. Um, where would you like to see Commander Kelrec evolve or grow into over the next part of the show?
Well, I know what happened, so I can't really say until people have seen season two, um, because his destiny has been determined by our writers. Um, but it's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested, and I would hope I just get to be involved in the show as much as I have been so far, and I hope that I would get to, do it some more. But when you're in this position as an actor, it's really about fulfilling the desires of the writers uh, in a way that still feels right for your character.
Hmm.
And Kelrick is such an interesting character that I haven't often felt that I needed to interject too much of my own ideas. I mean, but there's an open channel, if I get a script and I have a question about the dialogue or what a motivation is or what does this action mean, and sometimes I have them and then there'll be a new, the process is constant, it's not like this gets written and then it gets put in a glass box until 3 months later. Like it's constantly evolving and revisions and changes, and something that's happened in the episode before now changes a little bit the trajectory of this scene. They've got so many great writers working on it. There's so many people looking at it in such detail and with such experience that yeah, the journey that a writer sets your character on is that's their job, and my job is to interpret it and make it work the best I can. So I'm pretty much set. I mean, I just like still to be on it, and I hope we get to do it more, and I hope we get to be on it more. I would love to have more time with this character and this world, and also to see how the War College evolves, how the training evolves, how these students evolve. I'm as curious as the viewers. Like I said, I know what happens in season two, but I feel the same as you, because when it comes to season three, I'm just I would just be in dire anticipation to read the scripts or to chat with the showrunners when they'd written a bunch of them and say, hey, well, what are you looking for from me this season? Like, what's going to happen? And sometimes they tell you and sometimes they don't. And it's fine because, as an actor, sometimes it's fun to not know what's coming next. You're just playing the reality of what that script is and what that scene is. So, but no, they're great, and it's a very collaborative, good vibe around there. So, I just, very practically speaking, I just hope we get another season, and I hope I get to be on it.
Now, but some people may not know about it, that you're actually a frontman of a band called Raoul and the Big Time, which is a blues
Hmm.
band. We talk about collaboration. Is the collaboration of a band the same as collaboration as an actor?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think about being a musician and being an actor. I often just call myself a performer when people ask me what I do, because I do both these things quite a lot. Like I had a gig on Sunday, I have another gig on Sunday, playing music live. I mean, so I, yeah, I mean, they're both generally, even though I do a solo Hamlet, which is ironic for me to say this, but generally, if you're in the performing arts, it's a team sport. I think sometimes even a soloist, unless they perform entirely solo, always like in perhaps there's a concert pianist, but even then, they often play with orchestras and strings and all that. So being a performing artist, it's often a team sport. So yeah, I've had a band for 28 years. A couple of the members have been with me right from the start. And yeah, it's a great joy and a pleasure to have the opportunity to play music. I've done that pretty much as long as I've been an actor. Sometimes it comes in and out of focus depending on how busy I am in one thing or the other thing. Like right now, I'm doing a lot of music because I just finished Star Trek. I don't have another acting job starting right now. So this was a window where I was like, okay, go play here, play with this act, start this new thing up. So it's very nourishing for me as an artist because, sometimes, particularly if you're really focused on television and you're not doing as much live theater, um, sometimes it's a lot to demand or hope that if you're a guest star doctor in a small part on some medical drama that will like feed your artistic soul for a year. It's an unfair expectation to
Right.
have on shows. If you're lucky enough to play Kelrec, then you're like, oh no, it's cool, man. I have like a character arc. I get to work with all these great actors. I get paid well. Like, no, that's a dream job. But those aren't the jobs you always have as an actor. So as a musician, I have this thing that I book it myself. I control the schedule of it. I pick what music I want to sing. As an actor, I'm really an interpreter, right? Like you pay me to play this part in this show in this style. I'm classically trained. I try to do. I'm like a Swiss Army knife of an actor. That's my job. As a musician, I'm very centered on what I want to do.
Hmm.
I'm not like a guy as a musician who does like, I can't do a million other things. I've played blues and jazz my whole life. That's what I sing. That's what I like to sing. That's what I perform. I play harmonica. I play a bit of guitar. That's my life as a musician. As an actor, you know, you name it, I've probably got paid to do it.
Well, I got this information. My next question from Wikipedia, so I could be wrong. So feel free to correct me. And
Better than if it's from Chat GPT. If it's from Chat GPT, it's probably wrong. If it's from Wikipedia, it's probably semi-accurate.
well, hopefully, I've been wrong in the past, but we'll see. So I read that you worked with one of the musicians I'm actually a big fan of, Mavis Staples.
Oh yes.
What's because I mean she's someone who she has such a powerful voice. I will admit I learned about her from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, but since then I've bought a lot of her music. But
Incredible.
what is she like to work with?
Okay, so I've had the great honor to meet Mavis on a number of occasions. Um, where I've interacted with the Mavis Staples Band is that her band that backs her up and particularly in the era where I recorded with them, were a group of musicians from California who were very involved in the blues scene. And so I've recorded with basically her band. And they were on my 2014 release, Hollywood Boulevard. Two of the tracks on it are basically her band, which includes a real friend of mine, the guitar player Rick Holmstrom, who you will see Alaska native who spent decades in California. He's her musical director, her guitar player, one of her singers. So Rick is really my point person in that band who I've worked with, and I've played with him live as well when I've been in California. So yeah, it's but she's incredible. She's an absolute American cultural treasure. And I saw a clip of her performing 2 nights ago in Portland. She comes to Toronto almost every year. She's of this sort of incredible legacy of African American artists out of Chicago, like Buddy Guy, or from down south, Bobby Rush. These people are crested 90, and they're still performing live. It's totally inspirational, incredible, incredible.
So well, one thing I mean you're so busy. You do so much stuff. You're the host. I think last I read you're still the host of Raoul's Blues, which on Jazzcast, and that's what you're still doing.
Yeah, that's not on anymore. That was a channel that really took off during the pandemic, and I had a podcast, a weekly blues radio show podcast where I would do interviews and I would also play some of my favorite blues music. But that wound up a couple years ago. And to be honest, I just I barely have the time to do anything anymore. Like it's gotten
Yeah.
so busy. And I found also doing Star Trek that even if, Kelric wasn't in every day, I had to be careful not to have my schedule too full with the other things I do, just to make sure I was really like in good shape and very well prepared to do my job. So, so when Star Trek calls and that Star Trek season begins, I kind of dial a lot of my other activities down so I can give it my all, which I need to. Like I had a crazy thing in season one where I had pre-committed to a run of Hamlet solo in Syracuse, and I like you know, and I was doing another TV series in Halifax. I was doing the trades at the same time in Halifax, and I nearly split myself in two trying to do. I think in the course of 4 days, I did the TV series in Halifax, Hamlet solo in Syracuse, and Star Trek in Toronto, and I almost killed myself. And I was like, okay, let's not do that again. So when I've known more that the season's coming up, I've been a bit wiser about my schedule, um, so I don't do that to myself.
Well, like I mean, your life is so full. We got season two coming of Star Trek Starfleet Academy, which is awesome. You have Hamlet Solo coming out. What I mean is what's next a fair question, or is it just like with how many things do you have coming up next?
Well, it's crazy. This month is nuts. Everything I did in the last year is available in March. Tomorrow, which is the day we're recording, is a Wednesday. Tomorrow, Thursday, I have a guest star on an episode of Law and Order Toronto Criminal Intent, which is a Law and Order franchise reboot that's happened here. On Friday, season three of that workplace comedy I do on a channel in Canada called Crave, The Trades, that comes out, episode one. And then I have a movie that I'm in called Young Female Playwright that just premiered this week had its world premiere at Cinequest in Northern California. So the thing is, in April, hey, or by May, all my stuff will be out, and there won't be anything to watch until season two of Star Trek, probably. I don't know when that's going to come out. End of this year, beginning of next year. I have no idea. Nobody tells me these things. I don't think they even know exactly. Um, so yeah, this is the month where everything I've done in the last year is suddenly available. So that's it's been kind of exciting and I suppose something to brag a little bit about. But I'll be unemployed again in no time. That's how it is as an artist, unemployed again, or playing in bars for a fraction of the money I make acting on TV.
Well, sir, it's been an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. I hope you come back to talk about all your next project, including season two of Starfleet Academy. Unless you just want to have a conversation about it right this second, we can spoil everything. But an absolute honor, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to chat. I look forward to being back on again in the future if you have me.
Thank you so much.